Start the recording. Good morning, Wednesday, November 8th, day after Election Day, but we're not here to discuss politics, are we? So we last time started working through Module 11. The topic is GUIs, or Graphical User Interfaces. The subtopic is GUI 0, which is the library that we've chosen. It's not your only option on Python to use GUI 0. If you're using GUI 0, you have access to tkinter because that's what it uses. I think it's possible to load Python without tkinter, but not by default. So basically, after the introductory blah, 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 and the necessary hello world program, the rest of this unit really just goes down to talk about the widgets. And that's our goal, to go through this discussion, at least covering the widgets that are listed here. So what did we do last time? We talked about the APP widget. We have to, because it's the fundamental parent of all things GUI 0. Today, we're going to talk about the window widget, which is the same, but it's a child widget. Usually it's the child of APP. We talked about the box widget as the recommended layout tool, text widget, labels, text box widget we need to talk about today, push button widget we did talk about, and we did a demo program for lane control. And I was reminded, I said I'd post the program, so I did that yesterday. So this will get you to the code that we did together last time. Coming up on the 12th is an assignment. And your assignment is to make this happen. We talked last time that it's obvious that boxes are going to help you to do this. And give me just a moment to turn my fan on. What makes it tricky is that there's a top-down organization of this, which is the default layout, to center things top to bottom centered. But within each section, there's also a left justification of the fields. That's going to take a little bit of thinking. If, as a first pass in doing this assignment, you want to center all of the text fields and text edit boxes, feel free to do so. And if you can't get them left justified, submit it anyway. And I promise I'll take off no more than 5 points if instead of those things being left justified, they're center justified. Center justified is going to be a lot less aggravating. The area at the bottom here is just inherently aggravating because you have to worry about horizontal spacing, but give it a try. And down here is the lowly push button, which again, life would be easier if it were centered. So let's say 5 points off if you can get all of this information onto a form, but not left justified. I'm not sure why the person who designed it wanted to be left justified. It's possible that it's easier to do that if you're dealing with a grid, but I don't want to go there. So down here are just more widgets. My goal for today is to cover the window widget, the text box widget, and the pop-up, which is not a widget in the same sense. To do that, I've got, wait for it, another demo program. But before we do that, we have any questions on what we did last time? Let's see if we can go back and find that code. That was lane control. Questions? Just to review it quickly, Being lazy, I just imported everything from the GUI Zero library. I wrote 4 event handlers that are similar, but not the same. I have an APP window to put my stuff in. It has no parent. And then because of the layout, which was organized left and right, I created a box left and a box right. And I put my stuff in, not in APP, but I put it in box left or box right to create that layout. I also used anonymous boxes as spacers, and I put a couple of push buttons in there, and I associated each push button with an appropriate function, which in this case is called an event handler. What's the event? The event is you push the button. So I push this button, I expect something to happen. Push this button, I expect something to happen. I don't know if we're going to have the time next week, but this business over here having 4 event handlers basically stinks. It's not the way to do it. It's not efficient. It works just fine, but it's not efficient. So I'd like to go back, if we have the chance next week, and discuss how to make one event handler, attach each of these buttons to the same event handler, and pass to that shared event handler an argument list telling me what I'm doing. And what I'm doing is pretty straightforward. I'm either manipulating the left box or the right box, and I'm either opening or closing the lane. So probably I need to pass 2 arguments and receive them as parameters in my event handler. But I don't want to go down that road right now. I want to go down a different road. I want to design a new app. So what do I do when I want to design a new app? That's a question, not rhetorical. You know me pretty well at this point. What do I do?
You just kind of make it up as you go along.
Yeah, basically fake it, right? And to some extent, that's true. I make a sketch, pencil and paper. And this is the sketch I made. I did this because I want to have 2 windows. And my concept is this is going to be a ticketing window. And somebody sitting at an admissions booth is going to take a look. I don't know if people are in their cars or whatever, is going to take a look at how many adults and how many children are coming in. And they're going to fill in that number here into an edit box. That's my other goal, is to show you text edits, text boxes. When they have the whole party together, they're going to hit a button called ticket. And in a separate window visible to the people coming in is going to be something that tells them what their admission is going to be, some simple math. Darn, I forgot to do something. Some simple math and simulating, like a credit card swipe or something. We're going to give them a button that says click to pay. That will somehow record how much they're paying, charge their credit card, and also clear out this form. So looking at this, I know I have 2 event handlers, and of course I changed my mind on this one, which is why it's smudged out. This one, the event handler is going to be called ticket button clicked. This one, it's going to be called pay button clicked. The only other thing I need to account for is I want to know now which are my named widgets. This has to be a named widget. So TBX for text box adults, TBX underscore children, TXT underscore admission, and for reasons that I'll show you later, BTN underscore pay. So ticket is an anonymous widget. Click to pay is a named widget because I plan on manipulating it. Okay, so that's where I'm going. And I really did start with pencil and paper and erasing. So I changed my mind on the sizes. There are a couple of things that didn't make it into this sketch, but close enough. I've decided, for better or worse, that it's a good use of our class time to develop this with you, because this is only the second GUI Zero program you've seen. And not only do I want to teach you the features of GUI Zero, but I want you to kind of get the idea of a process of how to develop these applications, because that's all you're going to do for the rest of this semester is GUI Zero applications. So this is my second try at it. So I'll call it Park Admissions 2. And this, like the other program, is about a page and a half. So it's going to take a while, but it gives us some time to talk and hopefully some time to ask questions. Now, there's nothing about Python that has gone away from our discussion when we're doing a GUI application. All of Python is still there. We're just adding stuff. So one of the things is, of course, a docstring heading. Calculate cost of admission to, and now we're going to do some branding. Wow Park. Based on the number of adults and children. That's good enough. Import from GUI Zero, import everything. Get just a little bigger. Def main. Before I get distracted, the if statement and a call to main. And typically, and you're pretty much forced to do this, you have to start with a layout. Because if you don't have a layout, you don't have any place to put your stuff. And for those of you, anybody into George Carlin as a comedian or entertainer or commentator? Anybody know who George Carlin is?
Yeah, it seems like it's been a while since he put anything new out.
Yeah, for sure. That's because he's dead. We had say
When
again?
did he die? How long ago did he die?
A while back.
Yeah.
Probably a couple of, no, not a couple of decades, probably 15 years or so. We had the privilege of seeing him in concert a month or two before he died. He was not in good health and abused drugs. And there's a reason I'm telling you the story. I'm telling you the story because George Carlin did a sketch about stuff, about your stuff, that your life is revolved around what new stuff do I need and where do I put my stuff? And when I go on vacation, how much stuff do I need? It's kind of, so George Carlin had two phases of his life, the silly phase, where he did things like the hippy dippy weatherman, and the more serious phase where he did a lot of social commentary and tried pushing the edge of a lot of things. By far, his most famous sketch is the 7 words you'll never hear on TV. And he was thinking about network TV. It became famous when a radio station in New York, WBAI, decided to play the sketch in the middle of the afternoon to force the issue of whether obscenities could be forbidden on the air. Anyway, that's a diversion. So we need a place to put our stuff, and we put it in an APP window. And if I'm not very creative right now, I just leave my parentheses empty. So this is something very, very typical of building widgets. The name of the widget on the left of the equals, the class that creates the widget on the right, because it's a class that has an uppercase, starts with uppercase, required parentheses, and maybe stuff in the parentheses, maybe not. You need to know what goes in the parentheses, just hover. And PyCharm will pull up the docstring in the GUI Zero library to show you what's what. So you don't even need to go to the website for some of the information. I'll do what I did last time And I'm going to set a default text size. And that's going to equal 20. And what I didn't do last time, but we're going to try to free this up a little bit, is we're going to, oh no, we're not going to set a default color here. We'll do that in the other window. You must remember that if you don't do an app.display, your display is going to come up and go away in 1/10 of a second. So you might as well remember to put that in there. And this is testable at this point, but not so interesting. Now, my design clearly showed 2 windows. And we haven't done it yet, but it's, as they say, it's not rocket science. I'm going to do it in a very similar way. WIN is going to be the name of my window because there's only one. I'm going to build it using the window class, comes up as part of GUI 0. And the only thing that's different, is that it requires the naming of a master, APP. Or if you want to be more politically correct, the naming of the parent. So if this is the first window you create, the only master is APP, and that's usually what you do. If you have multiple windows, capital W, usually you just send them all back to APP. You could specify a child of APP as the master of a new window, but very little incentive to do such. And I've already lost track of where my eyes were. EYES, not the letter I. Now I could set some things for this differently. I can set the text size to bigger because it's an outdoor window and there's very little information in it. I can also set the text color to something more interesting. And I chose purple. Okay. Let's take a look. Let's balance out our spacing, or let PyCharm balance out our spacing. And if we take a look, we have 2 windows. Not very hard, right? If you can have 2 windows, you can have 3 windows. Unfortunately, we don't know which is which because we don't have any clues. So we'll come back and look at that later. Just checking that this does what it's supposed to do. And probably this is worth a comment. Create 2 windows. Now, feel free, this is a case where interruption is okay. Feel free to interrupt me if I'm saying something that you're not happy with, or you have a question, or I may have mumbled through. So let's build the APP layout. I want to start with a box on the top just to space things out. So it can be done anonymously. It's going in the APP window. I must specify a width and a height. The height will give me my spacing, and I chose 25. And as we found out last time, the width must be there and it must not be 0, but I don't care. So I'm going to call it 1, and I'm not going to bother with a border because I'm just using this as a spacer. So that's a layout technique that, that you need to know. Okay, so if I go back to my sketch, which of course I erased or closed. In this window, which is what I'm working on now, my APP window, looks to me like this window has a title, 2 rows of things that get input, and then another row for the push button. So this to me looks like a box. This looks like another box. These can go right in APP. So that's my plan. I have a plan, and we'll leave that there. So I'm going to create a box as a container for the adults. And it's going to equal a capital B box. Where? Well, in APP. Oh, I forgot my heading. I'll put that in a minute. And I must specify a height and a width. So the height is big enough to hold the information, which is not much. So we're going to call it 50. And the width, what came out nice for me later on is 250. So we'll just leave that there. Before we do that, what happened to the title? Oh, I did away with the title. Okay, never mind. Okay. So Eric was right. I just kind of make it up as I go along. Okay. So now I have a box for some stuff. And what do I want in that box? Well, I want a text box. And I need to, if you're creating a text box, think the GUI equivalent of an input statement. It has to be named because we need to know what's in the box. And if we didn't know, we'll need to know what's in the box. Why are we creating the box? So we're going to give it an easy to remember name, TBX for text box, and then something to tell me what it's for. It's the text box for the adults. And it is a text box. Where is it? Where is that text box going?
In the box.
In the box. That's why I created a box. What's the name of the box? Box adults. Do I want to populate this text box with any initial data? And the answer is, yeah, let me just put a 0 in there. And if you remember the sketch, there's a left to right alignment to form the row. So we're going to align this to the left. So that's my text box. It's not perfect, but it'll do. Next, I want to create just a text widget where in the box. And the text is going to be kind of complicated. The text is going to be adults at $20. And that's what I wanted to do that I didn't get a chance to do, is I wanted to make the $20 into a variable, and probably a global variable at that. And this is also going to be aligned to the left. So multiple lines to the left stack things left to right in the order in which they're created. Might as well check. If this is not working out, there's no reason to do the one for the children. Well, that's a little disappointing, isn't it? My box isn't wide enough, so things got clipped. Oh, and this is ridiculous, right? So this is a user experience failure in that this doesn't look nice and it's stupid to have a box that wide. Okay. This isn't a bad time to enforce the idea of parent-child. Who's the parent, the window on the left or the window on the right?
Window on the left.
Yeah, that's the APP window. This is the WIN window. If I close this window, the child window goes away. Why? Because it had it, well, quite frankly, it's because it no longer has a living parent. Sad but true. If I close the child window, no biggie. So you have to recognize that what you're seeing there is the parent-child behavior. Okay, so this text box is ridiculously wide. Okay. So I'm going to set its width, and this actually gets set in characters, not in pixels. So if I do that, now it fits in the box. And, you know, we're going to actually limit it to a maximum of 10. So that doesn't look bad. It's missing a little color, but it's not bad. And I cheated by making the $20 into a text field, not into a variable. But that's the way it goes. Okay, so if this was a good idea, that means that I could take this and use this as a model for the children. So we're going to create a new box for the children. What's my alignment? My alignment is really up and down. So that's the default, so I don't have to worry about it. So the text box is going to be called TBX children. And of course, it's going in the box for the children. And this text is going in the box for the children. And the text is going to be children at $10. And we're going to keep the same alignment. Check it out. Okay, we're not doing badly, right? We've got our 2 data entry rows. It includes a text edit and some fixed text. I interchangeably call them text edits or text boxes. They're actually text boxes as opposed to label text. All right, any questions how we got here? Pretty obvious? So the only other thing I need here is I need a push button, but I'd also like some space. So that's what these boxes are good for. They're good for creating space. And maybe this doesn't have to be quite so much space. But, you know, play with it and do what makes sense. Now, in many cases, push buttons can be anonymous. Where's it going? It's going in APP. I better put some text in there. If I don't put text in there, then nobody knows what the button's for. And I'm just going to call this ticket, meaning I want to be prepared to generate a ticket for the people who are coming in. You know that we're going to need an event handler, but I don't need it right at this very minute. I just want to see a push button there. So by default, it is stacked underneath everything, including an invisible box and an invisible box, and it is horizontally centered. So now it occurs to me that this window is too big. Therefore, it fails the user experience. So close the window, child goes away, come back to APP, and spend some time making it pretty and more informative. So I can give it a title. Title is going to be Wow Park Ticketing. We're going to give it a size. So the width is going to be 350. The height is going to be 225. And needless to say, this just was something I fiddled around with. And the background is going to be my favorite color, wheat, because it's nice and mild. Now I check. Reasonably balanced, probably I could use a little more border here. Again, you can spend a lot of time playing with this. Now, originally, this Wow Part ticketing was a title up here, a label up here. But when I made it in the title, then I decided I didn't really need it. So that's the difference in my sketch that I didn't catch up with. So the easiest thing to do here is just to decrease the spacing. So the spacing is now 20. And this is in pixels. Make it 15. And that's a little better balanced. Probably means the top should be a little less. Make this 20. Okay, so now I have something that is not ugly, right? It's balanced. It should be pretty obvious what's going on. I can click in these text boxes and put in whatever I want. I can hit the ticket button and of course nothing happens because there's no code. All right, so that's my first layout. And it took me a while. There's 15, 20 minutes to do this. And that's having done it before, probably more like a half an hour or so if you're just fiddling around with it. Okay, so we have built our APP layout. Now we're going to go ahead and build the Win layout. And we're going to start with a spacer. And this spacer is going in WIN. And what in the world did I pick for a height of this spacer? I picked 30. So let me stop, take a sip to drink, and then talk just for a little bit. For our push buttons and boxes and texts, and text boxes, our parent is where our stuff goes, right? The stuff goes into box_children. The exception to that is window. Here, we're not saying that this window is going inside of APP. We're saying that this window's parent is called APP. So we've established a parent-child relationship, but not a stuff, not a container, not a visual container kind of relationship. As we said last time, there are only 3 widgets that can contain stuff: APP, WIN, and box. All the others need to be put into a container. And box widgets can contain other box widgets. There's no concept of having an APP window within an APP window or WIN. That doesn't make any sense. So this layout is pretty darn simple. This layout is pretty darn simple. We have a spacer. We have some text, so we know what we're doing. Where, WIN. What's the text say? It just says admission. It's going to be the amount of admission. And underneath it, we need a label that needs to be changed. We don't need data entry, but we need a label. txt_admission. And it's a text widget in WIN. And the text that's going to go in there is $0.0.00. So that's how it's going to start out. And now I'd like another spacer. Because there's no reason that everything should be smushed together. It's a lot better visually to create a GUI space. And I have a button, ITN_pay. And that's just a push button in the window. And its text is going to be click to pay. And we know that this needs an event handler, but we're not ready for that yet. So we'll leave it out. And let's see how we're doing. Did we put a color? We didn't put a color or a size in this, did we? Let's do that. So the title, we didn't put a title either. The title is going to be the Wow Park Welcome Gate. And the width is going to be 350. The height's going to be 250. And the background is going to be yellow, because why not? Okay, now it's not a miracle that this thing fits. This came out of fiddling around. And I also fiddled around with text colors and background colors, because you can really make a mistake. So let's make a mistake. If I can remember, I think magenta seemed like a good idea. And it's not really too contrasty. It's kind of annoying, I think. And purple, I think, didn't work also. Oh, no, purple is what I used, purple. Violet, I tried violet. There you go. Okay, now, let me make a point about multiple windows. These, in the real world, these don't exist because they're part of the assignment. They exist because it's logical that there are multiple windows. So my concept was this window is to be used by some ticketing person in a booth, and this one is to be displayed to the person seeking admission. So naturally, there should be two windows in my mind. The next thing I want to think about logically is, what's the point at this moment of click to pay? Pay what? We're not going to issue a zero charge to somebody's credit card. Doesn't make sense. So this button is not appropriate at this point in time, which is the setup part of our program. So we have two things that we can do about that. And we can do it right here. And which one did I pick? I picked enabled. How do I know that that's a choice? Well, I hover over this and I find two things that are interesting to me: enabled and visible. And enabled is none. I wouldn't say so. I'd say enabled is true. Visible is certainly true. So there can be mistakes in these doc strings, or perhaps I'm not thinking about it correctly. So what happens if I say enabled is false? Not pretty much what you expect to happen in a GUI world. Notice the button's no longer clickable. So the button appears, but it's not active. And that's a very GUI concept, so to speak. Just because I have a widget doesn't mean that at this moment I want to enable the widget. Doesn't even mean I want to see the widget. So I can create it and make it either invisible or disabled. And that's kind of a cool concept. And I would say that that's a good concept for you to think about when you're doing your final project. Don't order a meal if there's nothing to be ordered, right? That's dumb. All right, questions up till now? We're about to get to the good stuff. Boy, I never know if quiet means you're getting it or you're glazed over or you walked away. But nonetheless, I'm here and the recording is going, so I will persist. This is the layout phase, and it took a while. Maybe we're up to a half hour-ish to get it this far. Next phase, which will start before our break, is event handlers. Now, since I made that beautiful sketch, I know that I need 2 event handlers, and I've actually given them a name. And the first one's called the ticket button clicked. And as a function, the name should be kind of like a verb. It should express an action. So clicked is the action. Clicked what? The ticket button was clicked. I don't want to write this now because I want to break. So I'm going to put the word pass in there. Having done that, I can now go back down to my ticket button if I could find it. And I could associate a command with it called ticket button clicked. Okay, what have I done wrong that I'm going to regret? If you don't know, you're going to do it wrong and you're going to regret it.
You called it?
I called it because I put parentheses. I let PyCharm give me parentheses. I do not want to call the button when line 39 executes. I want to register the name of the event handler to the command. That's, once you find out it doesn't work, if you know what's going on, it's pretty easy to fix. But just remember that you're not looking at the parentheses here and now. Okay, and that should have now caused this to come up in yellow. So that was so much fun, we're going to do it again.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you don't want to call it when you put it in that, when you list it like that, but what if you wanted to have arguments?
Oh, excellent question. I thought you were going to ask a different question, so I'll answer both. I thought you were going to ask me, what if outside of this command you want to call the function? And the answer is do it. Name of the function parentheses. So we could have a function called like reset display, and maybe you want to do that after you're done with your layout. And your question was, what if you want to have arguments? Args equals a list. 1, true. So this passes an argument list to this function at the time of the event, and you better be prepared to receive it up here, x, y. So if you're going to pass arguments, make sure that they are included in a parameter list in your function. Great question. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. So hover, args. And just remember that args has to be a list, even if there's only one thing in it. So there is your answer to how are we going to write a shared event handler for 4 buttons? And the answer is we're going to pass an identifier and a little more information in an argument list. Okay, so that's that one. We'll just wrap this one up quickly. This one is called pay underscore button underscore clicked. This one's gray because we haven't used it. This one's yellow because we have. Go back down here to our other push button. Say command equals pay. Take out the parentheses. We still have 4 warnings here because we have named things that we haven't used. Well, that makes sense because our event handlers don't have any code in them. All they have is pass. So it's our expectation after the break that we're going to use all 4 of these variables in our 2 event handlers. Cool. Questions about how we got to where we are? Or anything that's mysterious? Or you think I've done something with smoke and mirrors, which is an expression. We're good? Okay. Let's say that we'll get back to back together again at 9:30. I deserve a 12-minute break. All right. So Zoom the recording. Let's talk about where we are. We have some unfinished work. We've written command equals on both lines 41 and 49. We've defined existing functions that we wrote, but we haven't put any code next to them. We also have 4 named widgets that we haven't used. So we kind of expect those 2 things to go together. We're going to use them in our event handlers. So I guess it only makes sense to start with this one. If I'm doing what my conscience tells me I should be doing, I'm going to write a doc string. And PyCharm recognizes that I'm writing a doc string for this function. So it helps me out. It looks for parameters and it looks for a return statement, and it doesn't see any. So I can make a note in there about that. And now I can describe what I'm doing. Event handler for the ticket button. And most of what I'm going to do is to kind of repeat what I had in my head and calculate the cost of admission based on the number of adults and children. And anything else that, you see as applicable. Okay, so I can't calculate the cost of admission unless I know how many adults and how many children. Well, there's a text box for that. And think input statement. So we need to get the value back from the text box, which is called TBX adults. And what does that do? Well, that takes the widget and assigns it a name. That's not what we want to do. We want the value of the widget assigned to the name, but just like in an input statement, text boxes only give us strings, and we need an integer. So we're just going to precede that with an INT. And then we're going to do the same thing for the other one, int TB. And that's the advantage of my naming convention. I just type TB and I get all of my TBXs to come up for me, so I can just select them like that. Okay. Just like my input box, my input statements in the good old days, what can go wrong?
They can put in something that's not an integer.
Yeah, so they can do 2 things in general wrong. They can put in something that's not a number. They can put in something that's not an integer. And they can also put in an integer that doesn't make sense, like -5 or 450. So we're going to deal with all of those problems. The only way we're dealing with the not an integer is try except. So let's do that. Try. This might work, it might not work, but we can try. And PyCharm's going to tell me you can't have a try without an except, and you should not have a bare except. And I know that if this has an exception, it's going to throw a value error. So I'm going to put that there. And now I'm going to give you a quick introduction to a new GUI topic, and it's called pop-ups. Pop-ups are predefined windows. So you just say, I want to pop up, and it's going to show you a window. And what I want to show you is an error window. And to do that, I must provide a title in the window. And I'm going to do some branding here. All my windows are going to talk about Wow Park. And I need to provide some text. And the text will be enter numbers only. I was going to say integers, but, you know, we'll just stick with numbers. Okay, so that's satisfied. And is this testable? Sure. Why not? So let's add in a little print statement, which of course is going to go away. Adults and children. Okay, we're down to only 2 warnings. Yay. Okay. Hit the ticket button, not much happens. Make a mistake. Check it out. It's a pop-up. What kind of a pop-up? An error pop-up. How do I know it's an error pop-up? It has a red X. It has a title. It has a closed window. It has some text. And it has an OK button. So don't go building your own pop-up windows, right? Look in D2L. There's a link to the pop-up windows in the GUI 0 tutorial and explains about 8 different kinds of pop-up windows. We're going to use errors and infos, but there are others. I must hit OK over here to get back to my application. So if I correct that, it's okay. Oh, I missed something, telling you something, showing you something. Down here, I'm looking at the variables result, adults and children. So if I don't cause an exception, I can print those 2 things down there. But what about if I leave something out, if I leave it blank? I don't print and I get an error. So life is good. We're headed in the right direction. Now I don't need this print statement anymore. So when students or people come to me and say, it's not working, and that's literally what they say, my question is, what's not working? You know, what work have you done to figure out why your code isn't working? So now we know if we have legitimate integers there that we can print out we can get their values, we can print out their values. What are we going to do next? Check if the number of adults and children are reasonable. Because we don't want to be out in the weeds here someplace. We want to be with something reasonable. Okay, so the first reasonable test is that we're going to say as a rule, we're only going to accept numbers between 0 and 10 inclusively. So there's an if statement for that. A range-based if statement. Adults. And, whoops, not the rest. And not only that, but we have to apply the same rule, or we're going to apply the same rule to children. So if that is true, then I can do a calculation of a new variable called admission. And that is going to equal to some integer between 0 and 10 times 20 plus some other integer between 0 and 10 times 10. Now, shame on me for hard coding those numbers into my code. They really should have been variables, probably global variables, but that's okay. You can take off points if you wish. Now that I have a value, I created something called txt admission. And it's currently set to some kind of a string like $0.00. Well, now I have something to set it to. And the easiest way to do that is with the ever popular and friendly F string. F stands for friendly. No, F stands for format. So what does the string look like? It looks like a $sign and a space and the variable admission formatted as a floating point number with 2 digits after the decimal. And this says, I don't think so. It looks like you're changing something that's in the outer scope. Well, yeah, I'm not changing the widget. I'm setting its value. And that's a different concept. I don't need a global statement to do that. Okay, and now we're testable again. So 1 adult and 2 kids, hit ticket, fingers crossed, that helps sometimes. And the admission for that is $40. So far, so good. But we're not done. This button is still disabled. But what about if, by mistake, we hit the ticket button? The admission is 0. There's no reason to enable the button. So there's another test that, that we need. And another check, because there's another mistake we can make. 199 adults. And 0 children. Oh, we do have the between 0. Oh, okay, sorry, got a step ahead of myself. This if statement is good. So it stopped us from doing bad things. But we need an else statement to tell whoever is running this that they've done something bad. And that's another error. Based on branding, we'll keep the title the same. And this text will say, enter a number between, can't type, 0 and 10. Put this on the next line. And since we don't have something legitimate, I'm going to take this and set it back to $ space 0.00. Let's test again. Okay, different pop-up, right? Same title, different message. Enter a number between 0 and 10, and nothing happens. This actually goes back to 0, but that's only if there's something left over from before. Of course, same thing about negative numbers now. So we can fail one of these fields or the other. We can fail positive or we can fail negative, or we can fail by having something that can't be converted to an integer. The user has no idea what's going on, right? In this code. Oops. Hello. Where'd my cursor go? Okay. This is just an if else, popping the error pop-up. This is the try except. So there's two different mechanisms going on here. Your user better not be concerned about which one you've set, but you need to be concerned about it. So that's where we are now. Hold on, let me just close my door. Okay. Well, we still have the issue of this button, right? We've never been able to click this button. And that's a shame, right? If I happen to have no adults and no children, there's not much to do. There's no reason to click the button. So let's take care of that. And we will take care of that after we do this. And we'll do that with another test. If any tickets are being issued, allow the visitors to pay. All right, well, and a big clue there, if adults are greater than 0, and, no and, or children are greater than 0, then we can go back to BTN, which one? Well, the only one, BTN pay dot enabled equals true. So here's our next test. If both are 0, then there's no point in enabling the pay. So one or the other, or both, that's the way OR works. If they're greater than 0, but less than 10, then we can pay. You might note, especially if you're kind of math oriented, that these kinds of logical tests, there's always multiple ways of writing them. And if you look it up or if you've run across it in a math class, there's something called the Morgan's theorem that explains the relationships. Basically, ors become ands and the conditions become not. So when I wrote this originally, I said, if adults is not greater than 0 or children not greater than 0, and it's the same thing. But anyway, look up De Morgan's theorem if you're interested. All right, so as long as somebody's coming in, our button just got enabled. Maybe that's not the best choice of color because it doesn't contrast that much with the disabled, but nonetheless, the button is now clickable. So we're in the home stretch. The home stretch is, what are we going to do with this button? Well, that's our other event handler. And notice we've now got a green check mark. Yay. So one more event handler and we can go home. But you say you are home. Doc string happens to be returning none. Well, what's so great about these doc strings anyway? It's worth points to show that you can use it. It looks good on a not a resume, but a portfolio if you use it. And if you come down here to where we have already written a function with a docstring and hover over it, what do you think you get? You get a pop-up of the docstring. So PyCharm provides the first line. The work you did in the docstring provides the text and the returns. So that's why we love docstrings. And you don't have to listen to me complaining about you don't document your code. -5 points. This happens to be the event handler for the click to pay button. Click to pay button. And this is basically a cleanup. So we're going to reset all data fields. We are going to disable the button. Because we've just admitted the person, or they've just posted a charge. And we're going to welcome the visitors because we want their money. Easy. We have some TBX fields. What are they? They're TBX adults. And we're going to set the value of that back to 0. There's another TBX field for children. We're going to set its value back to 0. There's a text field, TXT, for admissions. We're going to set that back to $ space 0.00. Not the widget, value. We're going to go back to our button. And there's a property of the button called enabled. And we're going to set that to false. And lastly, we're going to pop a pop-up called info pop-up. And the info pop-up is going to have our branded title. So we're consistent through our application for WOW Park. And we're going to turn the page. Text. Well, fixed text. We don't need an F string. Welcome to WOW Park. Yay. And on a new line, \n, enjoy your visit. Yay. Okay. So this button, normally would be triggering some kind of credit card processing thing. We don't have anything that fancy. I guess I don't really need that blank line. Basically, just clean up, re-enabling the button and putting out a message. We still have a green check mark. That's encouraging. And if we have 1 adult and 2 kids, this is disabled, hit the button. This is enabled, hit the button, which is now clickable. And notice that the reset has already happened. This is back to 0. These are back to 0. This is disabled. And here's our info pop-up with a blue eye. If you're on a Mac, these pop-ups might look a little different. But there's still stuff that you don't have to do. PyCharm, GUI 0 will do it for you. Our window, I was expecting, here's, yeah, there we go. Whoa. This window is now blocked, which is why I'm getting the dinging. I don't know if you can hear the dinging or not. It's blocked because of this pop-up. There seems to be something to control that I've never used successfully. But if I hover over info, there's a master and it says which pop-up will be placed over. I don't see that, but maybe it's which pop-up, which window gets blocked. But anyway, not to fret too much about it. All right, what can we do to crash the program? That should be one of your biggest concerns, either on the job before you put something to production or send it to quality control, or as submitting something for grading. What can I do to screw up this program? Is there, I got to do these separately. Is there anything I can do to get an exception down here? Is there any combination of things here that cause a problem? And as far as I can tell, the answer is no. So I can go around any path I want here and not cause the thing to crash. Okay. Now, I hope it's worth the effort to go through this line by line with you as opposed to just telling you where it is. So I've had a request, like we talked about last time, to post this code, and I'm certainly willing to do that. All right. Questions?
Small question, but judging by how you handled it, I'm guessing there isn't. Is there so I noticed with you can like apply a setting to a lot of different fields at once using like inheritance. Is there any way to clear several fields at once? Because that's something I was trying to figure out. I couldn't really see any better way than to just go to every single field and set their value back to nothing to clear it.
Right. So you've opened up a wonderful can of worms. Again, just an expression. I don't know what it means. A long time ago, and they still be supported. Microsoft had a product called Visual Basic that supported GUIs, and it allowed you to create an array of widgets with indexes. So what you could do was you could just set up a loop and go through an indexed array of widgets and do whatever you want. For some reason that didn't catch on. I have no idea why. But there's something we can do, and I was planning on showing it to you next week. We can create our own array of anonymous widgets. And if we do, or well, let's use Python terminology. We can create our own list or tuple of anonymous widgets. And if we do, we can iterate over them in a for loop. So that's a wonderful opportunity. And there's plenty of examples where that would come in handy. So let's say we wanted to create a list of colors, 4 colors, and assign them to 4 buttons. It would be really nice to be able to do that in a loop. And we can, but we have to make up our own list of button widgets. Now, if you're thinking ahead, that is a powerful concept for the final project, because my vision of the data structure for the final project is a 2-dimensional list or dictionary that has rows and columns. And if you can negotiate those with for loops or nested for loops, life's going to be easier. So the answer to your question is yes, but not without a little work. Other questions? But I look forward to talking about that next week. Any other questions? So we have about 20 minutes, which I don't want to waste. So I think what I'd like to do, that I'm not prepared, but I'm pretty sure I can fake it, is I'd like to introduce you to the wonderful world of waffles. So we will call this a waffle demo 1. And I'm not going to be super documented about this. So as I think I've mentioned to you, waffles is just in the list of widgets. And when I first started using GUI 0, I ignored it because I couldn't figure out why to use it. Well, particularly the original author of this class, Jason Silverstein, started coming up with all kinds of clever ways of using waffles. And he was in the office right next to mine, and we'd come running over and saying, look what I can do, look what I can do. And eventually I saw the light, that these were interesting, flexible widgets that can be used in interesting ways. But they're a little complicated. There's many different parameters that you need to play with. From GUI 0, import everything. But I'm not going to give up on my idea of a main function. And of course, I can't give up on the idea of an APP widget, because if I did, I wouldn't have a place to put my stuff. So let's take a look at a waffle. It comes up just like any other GUI element. It must have parentheses because it is a class. And behind the class is something called a constructor that you'll learn more about in programming too. So we have to put this stuff someplace. We're going to put it in APP. Okay, well, that's exactly what the tutorial shows you. It shows you that the default waffle is a 3x3 array of squares that are all white. It then goes on to tell you that it, of course, doesn't have to be 3x3, and it can also be rectangular in shape as opposed to square in shape. The next exciting news is that the squares don't have to be squares, they can be circles. And don't even get me started on colors. Now, we will talk about colors in a bit. So let's make this, actually, let's do what they have in the in D2L. Let's create a traffic light-ish thing. So what does that mean? That means that the width, not in pixels, but in cells, which they call pixels in the GUI 0 tutorial, which may be a case of the fact that they talk a foreign language, which is British, but I like to refer to them as cells. So it's going to be 1 column by 3 high. And by the way, traffic lights are circular, not square. So that means that there is a parameter called dotty, which again sounds like some Briticism, that I will set to true because I want the thing to appear as dots. Now that's a little forced, right? But it works. Okay. So there's a 1x3, 1 row, three rows, 1 column, and they're circles. Well, they're not very big, are they? So, of course, I can hover over this and I can see the whole story. The master is required. Height and width defaults to 3. DIM, which we're going to talk about right now, is dimension. Padding is spacing. Color is color. Dotty we already talked about, and the rest are pretty much the same as anything else. So let's try to make this a little nicer. Let's try to take the dimension and expand it to 100 pixels. And let's take the padding and spread it out a little. And that's good enough for right now. Aha! Now we're in business. We have circles, not squares. We have big circles. And we have a consistent space in between them. And that same space is at the top here. So it's this, it will give you that margin here. It'll give you that margin in between. The margin at the bottom is a coinky-dink. And if I do this, I should be able to see that that's a coinky-dink. Happens to be 500 by 500 for the overall window. Okay. Now, this saves you a lot of programming. Essentially, this is 2 lines of code, lines 7 and 8. You don't have to draw circles. You don't have to put them places. And that's only part of it. Of course, this waffle is static. It never changes. So let's start thinking traffic light and make it black. So, well, we probably want a frame around it or something to make it look more. Oh, maybe we just don't want it as wide. There you go. So the app window. Now, for an app window, you don't have to specify both height and width. You can take the default. Good guess. All right. Static layout never changes. And everything's the same color. So let's do something static right now. And let's change the colors to different things. Well, if I'm going to do that, I need to name the widget. WAF underscore traffic underscore light. This is now misaligned. Okay. Check it out. Are you sitting down? WAF traffic light, square bracket, 0,0, which incidentally is not Python. Python would have bracket 0, but this uses commas in there. And the property of that cell that we wish to change is going to be set to red. So far, so good. Might as well see if it worked. Yay. So what we found out is that these cells are individually addressable, and we can individually set their color, set their dottiness, and actually we can respond to clicks individually, but that's a story for another day. So this worked so well. Let's repeat it. So the first one is the X location, which stays at 0. This becomes a 1. This becomes yellow. This one becomes 2, and it becomes green. So individually addressable cells, don't forget that it's X comma Y, which is not Python. Python would be bracket X, bracket Y. We start at 0, which is what we usually do. And there you go. So that's all layout and it's all static. And now I have to decide, where do I go from here in 10 minutes? Okay. Obviously, this is not what a traffic light looks like. Traffic light is either red or yellow or green. And the amount of red time, yellow time, and green time can be adjusted. But that's too complicated for for what we want to do now. So in consideration of trying to get done in 10 minutes, let's say that what we want to do now is to create a blinking red light. And that means that the other two lights are going, well, no, that means all of the lights are going to be black when we start. And now we have like a major issue to discuss. If the light is going to blink red, it's not because somebody clicked on something. Blinking is something that happens based on time. And we need an event, but we need a time-based event. And fortunately, GUI 0 provides us with not one, but two ways of doing that. One is called repeat. And repeat says, how often do you want to repeat this event based on a timer? It's in milliseconds. So we're going to use 500 milliseconds. And the name of the event is going to be blink. And this is just like command equals. It's the name. Well, if we're going to do that, we're going to have to write an event handler. Here's an event handler. And what we want to do is we want to take waffle light 00, and we want to set it to red. Let's see what happens. And don't tell me it won't work, because I know it won't work. And boy, did it not work. Okay, it didn't work big time. And that's because I forgot dot color. Okay. Okay, notice, if you will, that it didn't turn red for a half a second. So a half a second later, we call this function and we turn the thing red. Well, that's not what blinking is it? Blinking is blinking between red and black. So there are a number of ways of solving this problem. And I think I will show you what I think is one of the more intelligent ways. If waffle light 00 dot color, because it's a property, if that color is black, then I want to make it red. If the color is black, I want to make it red. Since I'm only going to give it two choices, if it is not black, I'm going to make it black. Okay, now this is the point at which you stand up and you applaud. We have made magic. We've now have a GUI program that is event-driven, but without human interaction. The event is a timed event. It comes off of line 16. It says twice a second, every 500 milliseconds, call a function called blink. Blink examines the color of the cell. If it's black, it makes it red. If it is not black, it makes it black, because that's the only two possibilities. Now, there are a number of ways of doing this, some of them more or less elegant, some involving a Boolean variable, but this is probably the fewest lines of code that you can get away with. Questions, comments? And I guess I could post this also. The blinking isn't relevant to your upcoming assignments. Turning a single cell a different color is project number 3. So that idea is important for project number 3. All right, we're good. So waffles, your choice of numbers of rows, number of columns. Your choice individually, do you want the cells of the waffles to be dots or not? How far between them? How big are they? Their dimension, how far between them, their padding, a default color, and whatever else you happen to see here when you hover, which is probably not much. I think we've covered pretty much what you'd expect. So they're not hard to use. The other big thing that I wasn't planning on doing today, but why not, is introduce you to app.repeat as a time-based handler. Its cousin is app.after. App.after does something once after a delay, and that's also handy. But not in this case, because we want the blinking to continue. Now, this can get fancier. We could have another button, a push button that turns the blinking on and off. And if you're, if you have the time and the interest to do some more work with this, create a button that either turns the light red all the time or blinks. All righty, we're good. If we are good, then I'm going to start breaking things down.